I went home and I pulled out my photo album, and I came across that picture, and it made me really uncomfortable, and it made me shudder, but I didn't know why. I started having flashbacks to the abuse. I buried it in my head. He was our friend. He was just always there, and we all thought so much of him. I feel so bad because I was his first parish, and I didn't tell on him. And I feel so much guilt for those that came after me. And I know that others came after me because I've spoken to them.
The very things that make us feel safe, accepted, and loved, like home, faith, and intimacy, have been forever altered for countless survivors of priest sex abuse.
He'd abuse me in the base of my house and then go up and have dinner with my family. And I would sit at dinner and think, doesn't anyone see I'm different?
All of my adult life, I carried this secret. No, I've never told anybody about this.
They're trying to keep as much of Bill Reinecke's history buried as is possible because it's obvious he had a long and he had a very detailed history of sexual abuse of young people that goes way back, and they don't want that known.
In 1965, the oldest Roman Catholic church in Virginia, now known as the Basilica of St. Mary in Alexandria, was home to a young 26-year-old priest by the name of William Reinecke. That same year, 13-year-old Kelly Arnold began as an altar boy at St. Mary. Becky Ianni was in elementary school and, at the time, an enthusiastic member of the parish.
He was a brand new, newly ordained priest. He came to our house and he sort of adopted our family. He came and he ate dinner at our house 2 and 3 times a week.
My parents idolized the man. He baptized my baby sister.
In fact, Arnold grew so close to Father Reinecke he eventually addressed him by his first name.
No, the parents loved this man. Everybody loved Billy. Everybody loved Billy. You can't get around that fact.
Years later, Father Reinecke ascended to Chancellor and Vicar General, among the most powerful positions in the Diocese of Arlington, positions allowing him to review pedophile priest complaints.
The pedophile was in charge of all the other pedophiles.
But long before he attained the esteemed title of Monsignor, Father Reinecke groomed and sexually assaulted children like Becky Ianni, who says her torment lasted from ages 8 to 12.
This was pictures of me at all the different ages. I became a lot more serious as time went on because of the abuse. I became a different person.
Ianni, now an advocate for abuse survivors with SNAP in Northern Virginia, says Father Reinecke cost her nearly everything: her self-confidence, her faith, and her smile.
Because I knew that God could read my thoughts. And I thought, if he knows this is happening, then I'm going to hell. So I just buried it until I came across this picture.
Ianni says when she was 48 years old in 2006, she found this haunting Polaroid. It's Father Reinecke sitting beside Becky on a couch during the time of her abuse in the 1960s. After seeing this one picture, the memories flooded back.
I think by telling our stories, we're telling the next generation, it's okay to talk about this. It's okay to come forward. We're going to believe you. And it doesn't matter whether the church believes you, we're going to believe you.
Ianni then appeared before the Diocese of Arlington Review Board, a panel made up of clergy and lay people that decides if an allegation of priest sex abuse is credible or not. she recorded her testimony.
Okay, well, I just wanted to start out by saying that it's really, really hard for me to be here. I was maybe 9 years old. I didn't know what he was doing. I didn't know what sex was. I just know that it was wrong. And he changed my life at that point. I wasn't innocent anymore. Not only that, but my house wasn't safe anymore. The house where I grew up, the house that I loved, I didn't feel safe in it anymore. And I started realizing that I wasn't like everybody else. I wasn't normal. Something was wrong with me. I wish I knew if he ever really liked us. Or was he only nice to us so he could hurt us? But I'll never know because he's not here. He can't say sorry. He can't tell me why.
With mounting pressure from the public, abuse survivors, and law enforcement agencies, more than 100 Catholic dioceses across the country have released their lists of priests credibly accused of sex abuse. In February, Richmond and Arlington released their lists. When we reviewed these documents from Richmond and Arlington, what we discovered was a profound lack of detail. So we requested on-camera interviews with both dioceses. These requests were denied. However, these organizations have issued public statements stressing that by publishing these names, more victims will come forward, get the help they need, and begin the healing process. Arlington named 16 priests, Richmond 43. Several names appear on both lists, including William Reinecke, because until 1974, Catholic churches in Northern Virginia were a part of the Diocese of Richmond. Here's where things get interesting. In most cases, like in Reinecke's, bishops are only providing the most basic of information about the accused, like when they were ordained and died. Nothing even close to the entire story. Church officials contend this lack of information is done intentionally to protect the identities of abuse survivors. Yet when pressed, the Diocese of Arlington admits, since Father Reinecke's death, we've become aware of several individuals who allege that he sexually abused them as children.
You know, there's something very liberating about stopping the secrets.
For half a century, Kelly Arnold refused to talk publicly about what he witnessed. Now, this former altar boy in Father Reinecke's parish is sharing his 50-year secret to hold the church more accountable and to apologize for not coming forward earlier.
It was a wonderful time that we lived in. We just didn't know we were living with a pedophile, is the thing. I mean, in hindsight, you know, we were living with a pedophile.
Arnold says Father Reinecke paid altar boys, usually 13 to 15-year-olds, to do odd jobs around the parish. Sex abuse experts say that this was likely a part of Reinecke's grooming process. They would tend to the church's vast cemetery grounds and paint rooms in the rectory. As a sign of appreciation for their hard work, Reinecke selected certain boys to travel southbound with him by car down Interstate 95. Taking those boys on overnight trips to his hometown of historic Williamsburg. The Diocese of Arlington now admitting trips with minors that would not be permissible under today's standards. It became evident that some victims were abused during those trips.
His parents lived in Williamsburg. He was very familiar with Williamsburg, and so I think that there was that. And Williamsburg was close by. You know, he had been a tour guide at one point, so he could take them around, kind of show off. So I think that that's why he took them there.
Arnold says they usually stayed at motor inns, like the now shuttered Lord Paget. He says for a couple years, Reinecke went on countless trips with boys.
It was always the case that I had a bed to myself, and Billy had a bed to himself, and then Billy would choose the boy that he wanted to sleep with.
Arnold says at the time he didn't think anything of it. Upon reflection, he suspects that Reinecke likely molested boys dozens of times.
He and I had never had any kind of sexual contact. But I did witness him contacting another kid sexually.
What Arnold witnessed, though, did not happen in a Virginia motel.
And Billy came up with the idea that we ought to go to Puerto Rico.
Arnold says in the summer of 1969, Father Reinecke easily convinced a pair of parents to take their sons, Kelly and an unnamed boy, on a Trans-Caribbean Airways flight to Puerto Rico, where they spent 4 days and nights touring historic buildings and playing along sandy shorelines.
A wonderful time at the beach. We got out on the beach every day, and of course it rained in the afternoon, and you'd pack your things up, and then the sun would come back out again. So
He says they stayed at a boarding house somewhere on the outskirts of Old San Juan.
I woke up in the middle of the night and saw him performing oral sex on another altar boy.
Arnold says the boys agreed to never speak of what happened in San Juan. They feared getting in trouble, or worse, the church community ostracizing their families.
I don't think anybody would have ever believed me.
Kelly Arnold now seeks forgiveness, certain more children were abused because he did not come forward.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry that that happened. I was not the perpetrator, but I was I've lived all of my life thinking of myself as an enabler.
As it turns out, Father Reinecke tried to not only poison Becky Ianni.
I gave up the church, and I gave up God, because I thought, I've been abandoned.
He also set loose his demons on her older brother.
When I first started remembering my abuse, the therapist suggested I write my family. And so I couldn't write everyone, but I wrote my oldest brother. And he immediately called back and said, yes, I was abused too.
Ianni's brother wrote a letter to the Diocese of Arlington in 2006 to support his sister and to reveal his nightmare.
On several occasions, he took I and another boy, either Kelly Arnold or another boy, on trips to various places, including his parents' home in Williamsburg, Virginia. He would on a regular basis be in the bathroom with me when I was taking a shower. He used to excuse that the steam was necessary so he could see to shave. He would sleep in the same bed, and during the night he fondled me and the other boys.
With the help of SNAP, we did find additional victims of Father Reinecke. None, though, felt comfortable talking about their haunting pasts. Father Reinecke's sinister reach, according to Becky and Kelly, was expanding. The unnamed victim in Puerto Rico, Becky's brother, and an unknown number of other boys abused on those trips to Williamsburg. Church officials insist no one leveled abuse allegations against Monsignor Reinecke until after his death in 1992 at the age of 53. So he was never removed from public ministry or criminally charged. But Becky Ianni and Kelly Arnold say they were aware of a much different story. Parents at St. Mary deeply concerned about Father Reinecke's interest in boys.
Because the other thing I found out is that 2 men from our parish went to the bishop during my abuse. The one man that I spoke to said that they went and they told him that they were concerned about his activities with young boys, the trips and the wrestling afternoons and things like that. And I said, well, what did the bishop say? And he said, well, he didn't say anything, he just moved him.
Ianni says soon after that meeting, Reinecke was transferred to St. Charles in Arlington.
He abused Several people that we know in my parish and at least 2 in the next parish.
If you are marked, so to speak, for lack of a better word, marked, then the diocese will move you around, and what they did was move him up.
In 27 years, Father Reinecke was moved 6 times. From 1965 to 69, St. Mary in Alexandria. 69 to 74, St. Charles in Arlington. 74 to 76, he attended Catholic University. He didn't have a parish, but lived at Our Lady of Lourdes in Arlington, and then Queen of Apostles in Alexandria. In the late 1970s, he went back to Our Lady of Lourdes. From 80 to 90, St. Ambrose in Annandale, and from 90 to 92, St. James in Falls Church.
They paid for his education to move him out of parish life. They were pushing him out of parish life. That was the bottom line.
One of Reinecke's fellow students at Catholic University was none other than Tom Doyle. But soon the paths of these 2 men of the cloth would divert in profound ways.
I have been involved in this, directly involved, since the very beginning, and no one else has.
Doyle was an ordained priest and lawyer at the Vatican Embassy in Washington, D.C. in the 1980s. He says he was told to keep quiet about a priest sex abuse scandal erupting in parishes across the country.
The institutional church, and by that I mean the bishops, wanted to cover it up. And I also learned in time that they not only wanted to cover it up, but they had been covering it up all over the country, and as I found out as time went on, all over the world.
Doyle hardly remained silent. After a stint as a chaplain in the Air Force, he left the priesthood to focus all his attention on advocating for abuse survivors. This court-certified expert on canon law now serves as a witness in court cases and consults for states and nations investigating priest sex abuse. He says while today's Catholic Church is doing better at dealing with abusive priests and helping victims, the latest released lists from Richmond and Arlington do not tell the whole story.
The information is either incomplete, but even more important, the names, the list of names are incomplete. And they're done that, it's done intentionally. They know they're incomplete. And they decide, well, we figured that this one was not credible. Well, they're not in a position to decide what's credible and what isn't credible. I mean, that whole concept is totally ridiculous, where they're going to judge themselves and police themselves, because obviously they can't. They haven't been able to do it yet and do it right, so they can't start now.
And he adds the lack of transparency about Father Reinecke's past is no surprise either.
Somewhere along the line, someone was too afraid to report him. And a lot of that fear came from the brainwashing by the Catholic Church. He's a priest, you can't turn him in. And I even wonder, had somebody turned him in way back then, if they'd even been believed. We won't know that, we'll never know that. And I recall receiving a phone call one day from a friend of mine here in Washington, who said to me, Tom, you're not going to believe this, but Bill Reinecke committed suicide. And I said, what? He said, yeah, Bill Reinecke committed suicide.
According to published reports, one of Reinecke's abuse victims confronted the Monsignor outside St. James Catholic Church in 1992, demanding his resignation for molesting him years ago. Reinecke then embarked on the long drive west to Berryville, Virginia. He was heading to a scheduled retreat at Holy Cross Abbey, a remote monastery along the West Virginia border.
He just knew where he had to go, and he took that course.
2 days later, on this idyllic property nestled in the Shenandoah Valley, Monsignor William Reinecke killed himself, his body discovered in a nearby field.
He just couldn't go on. He could not go on is the bottom line.
But I was surprised. I was very sad.
I haven't forgiven the church who I feel allowed him to continue to abuse. But I've forgiven him. It doesn't do me any good to still hate him.
Reinecke's full story will be forever buried with him at Cedar Grove Cemetery in Williamsburg. His simple headstone located not far from the very motels where horror unfolded for countless children. For Becky Ianni, Kelly Arnold, and Tom Doyle, the darkest hours of their lives are connected to their faith, each admitting their once cherished relationship with God has been forever corrupted. But now Arnold, by revealing the 50-year secret, joins a movement dedicated to revealing the truth and helping heal the abused.
You might feel like there's no hope. I did. I felt like there was no moving forward. I was going to forever be in this place of pain. And as I began to heal, and then I look back now, I think, wow, I've come such a long way. And I guess I want every survivor to know they can do that too. You can heal. It takes time, but you can do it.